The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise to speak on the Trade Support Loans Amendment Bill 2023. Following the federal budget release, I have been highly vocal about the need to ease the pressures for students with HECS-HELP student loans, especially with the 7.1% indexation increase. This is such an important issue that affects the young people in my electorate of Fowler, and probably also across other electorates in the low socio-economic disadvantaged electorates, who are struggling. These students are struggling to meet their day-to-day expenses and are now facing further financial hardships. As you would have seen on various media reports, student debt indexation is projected to have a lifelong impact on students' borrowing capacity, as student debt will be factored when applying for any loans with financial institutions. This would mean that your children, nephew, nieces, siblings or cousins may be crippling in further debt following the 7.1% indexation. This percentage of government-initiated indexation is much higher than the wage growth of 3 to 4% that many Australians have received right now. Therefore, I move the amendments as circulated in my name. Naturally, I'm concerned with some of the unintended consequences of this loan. Vocational education and training is instrumental to Australia's growing economy, and supporting the development of these skills through our legislative bills are critical. Nearly 13,000 people in my Fowler electorate are currently in some form of tertiary education. Almost 12% of employed people aged 15 years and over are currently in the technician and trades work. Since the introduction of the Trade Support Program in 2014, it has allowed for Australian apprentices, including those in Fowler, to obtain a loan of up to $22,819 in total for the 2022-23 year, and paid monthly in arrears to meet everyday living costs. Branded as interest-free loan, apprentices are not required to repay the loan until they are earning an income above the minimum repayment threshold of $48,361 as of this year. Apprentices who complete their apprenticeships will receive a 20% reduction on their trade support loans. At face value, this appears enticing to apprentices in trades to assist with the growth of in-demand occupations. In practice, however, there are some shortcomings with this piece of legislation that I'm not convinced are being holistically addressed in this bill. I have concerns that these trade support loans, which is now being revamped as the Australian Apprenticeship Support Loans, could track more hopeful students into further debt. Speaker, after unpacking this bill, I understand that it will have the following key effects if implemented. 1. Lapse the TSL priority list and replace it with the Australian Apprenticeships priority list to expand eligibility to other high-priority occupations that are non-trade, such as aged care, disability, childcare, nursing, personal assistance, therapists, etc. The Minister to be empowered to have regard to any relevant advice by the Minister of Jobs and Skills Australia for the AAPL. I acknowledge that these developments will bring forward some positive changes, such as better access for women who want to pursue non-trade occupations, and I applaud the government for including women in this bill. Given the fluidity of this list through this change, I hope this will keep Australia in check as our country and economy evolves and our priorities change. I understand that the Minister is not prevented from having regard to other advice, so I urge the Minister to actively obtain advice from fellow MPs across the entire political spectrum, especially with low socioeconomic electorates, to ensure that the occupations are aligned with not only the needs of Australia's economy, but will also pave a pathway for disadvantaged communities to gain meaningful and fruitful employment. However, this bill is a double-edged sword. Whilst I welcome the expansion of the loans to other critical occupations, specifically in the childcare and aged care sectors, I ask the government to consider whether there are sufficient incentives to encourage individuals to engage in the Australian apprentice support loans and make this bill a success. According to a recent report by the Australian Financial Review, about $1 billion are outstanding in trade support loans, and 1 in every 2 trade apprentices drops out before completing the course. Mr. Speaker, this is not a small figure. Despite the incentives of the discount of 20% on completion, not all individuals are inclined to finish their apprenticeships, as other jobs may actually pay more. In the same article, it reports that first-year apprentices and trainees can earn as little as $13 an hour, being $520 a week. The current cost of living pressures prevalent in Australia, particularly experienced within the Fowler electorate, may further deter individuals from wanting to enter the professions being in demand because of the earning. People have families to provide for, and it may not be realistic to survive and live off the poverty earning of just $520 a week, especially in major population centres, and including with the increasing high rent that we're experiencing at the moment. So also just consider the food expenses. A bag of sliced wholemeal bread was $1.80 in 2018, and now minimum $2.70, depending on the brands of bread. Let's consider the cost of commuting for apprentices to travel to and from work. If an apprentice was to travel from Cabramatta Station to Central Station, it's about $3.79 one way and a total of $7.58 return. The apprentice commutes 5 days a week, which would equate to about $37.90. Whilst the difference may not appear blatantly drastic, every cent adds up for families who are disadvantaged, not to mention the amount of tolls and cost of fuel for those who drive. While these loans are branded as interest-free, they do not actually come for free. The Australian Apprentice Support Loans under this program are still indexed according to the Consumer Price Index to meet the real market value of the loan. This is essentially the same issue as other accumulated and study and training loans. If you consider this against the cost of living crisis, this is an obvious issue for those who are disadvantaged. One young local professional told me that her HECS debt has increased $4,400 this year, yet she only entered the workforce 4 years ago. After sharing her experience to other young hopefuls in her community, most are deterred from studying her profession, given the accumulated debt and indexation. This is no different to other hopeful Australian apprentices looking to enter their chosen professions, only to be disillusioned by the anticipated debt and indexation. To think how much this will build up year on year is unfathomable. Will our young people and future generations be able to break the debt cycle? I ask the government, and especially its member from Western Sydney and those representing low socioeconomic electorates, how can you realistically slug students and apprentices with an index increase of 7% plus, which is much higher than the current average wage increases? And at a time with soaring interest rates, stubbornly high house prices, how can first aspiring home buyers take out home loans when their borrowing capacity is impacted by the dark mark of a bigger study and training debt? Our youth are the future of Australia, and the people that will be assisting with rebuilding the economy. They are our future. By not addressing the indexation within this bill, we are continuing to handicap their brightness of their potential. For a Labor government that in its history proudly announces the Whitlam government's introduction of free education, this current indexation is certainly a vast step backwards, and history will judge this. It is certainly not in the tradition of compassion and support that is needed in this current cost of living crisis. If we cannot revert back to 1974 to provide free education, we should, at the bare minimum, do something about the indexation for students and apprentices. I mean, who would not be deterred when they hear that they should expect a 7.1% indexation just of this year for entering a profession that they are passionate about and could be one that Australia needs to drive the economy? It is simply not enough that we are opening the categories of occupations eligible for these loans and offering a 20% discount on completion. Speaking with a few aspiring early childhood educators within Fowler, it was noted that they would prefer, at the minimum, the indexation to be reverted back to 2022 rate of 3.9% for loans under the Australian Apprenticeship Support Loans, and an increase of the discount to reflect at least a quarter of their loan amount. In my view, These are more attractive incentives that should be drafted into this bill and is more in line with the current economy and living standards. If this bill is intended to create better access and opportunities, especially for women entering the care sector for employment, the bill must be curated with this intention at the forefront. The government can do much more to support individuals who are seeking to rely on this loan and enter into the demand labour workforce. Therefore, I call on the government to consider reverting the indexation back to the 2022 rate of 3.9% and frozen at this rate, perhaps for at least 3 years for Australian apprenticeship support loans indexation, upon earning the minimum repayment income, to allow disadvantaged individuals to work full-time, pay down their loan and be able to meet their cost of living needs. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Senator Marine Faruqi, who has put apprentices and students' interests at the forefront since the announcement of the indexation. While it's a long conversation on reducing and perhaps abolishing indexation altogether, I look forward to seeing the future changes that may be proposed in this area of concern. We need to give young people a kickstart in their career beyond just a loan. There should be a safety net where they know that they can engage in the demanded profession without being hit with a mountain of incrementally growing debt. Thank you, Speaker.
Is the amendment seconded?
Amendment and reserve my right to speak.